you'll see on the right-hand side is the superego, the critic, the judge. It's the red circle. And this map I find really helpful because it's a parts work map. And what it actually discerns is the judge from the part that is attacked by the judge. That's what we could call the victimized part, or I just call it the child part, because with the inner critic attacking us, it activates the child part that feels ashamed, hurt, small, diminished, powerless, not good enough. Often it activates those core beliefs of shame, and it makes us needy for approval and to be kind of re-experience connection. So it activates the need and the longing for approval. I notice that whenever I'm in shame, the one thing I long for is someone to say, "You're okay, Noel.
Mm.
You matter." So often that longing gets evoked. So you'll see that the inner critic, its judgments, its standards often triggers a part that feels attacked by the judge. And that feels so horrible. The shame, the feeling of diminishment, the feelings of feeling shut down and frozen. Because often the inner critic it might initially activate anxiety, but over time it triggers dorsal vagal physiology when it's a really intense attack. We go into shutdown. And that feels so horrible that we will find some management strategy to get away from the attack. And that's the green circle. You'll see we call that a creative adjustment in Gestalt therapy, which might be you collapse and absorb the attack and just agree that it's true and go into a shut down, withdrawn place as a way to cope. And then you don't take any risks and you don't stick your head out in case someone judges you. Or you might go into a defense mode like fight, control, blame, attack. Like narcissism is in a way a defense against shame. You might go into an appease mode where you feel like you have to please everyone in order to feel okay. Or go into a over-rational argumentative mode, into the intellect to try to fix everything or try to be perfect. Or you might project your judge onto everyone else and see everyone else is judging you rather than recognizing your own inner critic. So we kind of develop these strategies for coping with the part that feels attacked. So you could say there are three aspects of a critic attack. There's the inner critic, there's the part that gets attacked, and then there's the part that's trying to manage the attack by defending against it. So I find that really helpful to unpack shame and self-criticism into these three parts. And then in terms of starting to work with the judge, which we'll probably start talking about in a minute, one thing that helps is cultivating the adult self, which is, we could put that down to learning how to be present, learning how to cultivate ventral vagal resource states where we feel more regulated, more connected, more safe in our bodies and our nervous systems. And from that place, when we've cultivated more that grounded, embodied, connected, regulated place in our nervous system and our bodies, we have more capacity then to actually turn towards the judge and start to relate to it rather than be blended with it. And maybe we can go into a bit more depth about that, but I've just written here, understand, befriend, and set limits with the judge. So sometimes we have to set limits with it, and that supports disidentification from the judge and more space. Once we've done that, then we can turn towards the child part that might carry all the wounds of our developmental trauma, or perhaps it's a shock trauma or a cultural trauma. And we can turn towards it and witness it and support that part of us that is carrying a wound without the judge coming in and sabotaging that. And sometimes we want to work with the part that's the coping strategy, the part that's trying to manage the shame by being perfect, or all the patterns that we develop to try to manage dysregulation by numbing out, by being perfect, by fighting and controlling. it's very helpful to also build understanding and compassion to those parts so that they can start to step back. And then there's more space to actually do the deeper healing work of supporting the parts of us that have been truly wounded. And I'll just say one more thing. Often the inner critic gets reactivated when we go into our survival strategy, the coping strategy. Like maybe you go into when you get triggered into shame by your inner critic because perhaps your partner said, "Why didn't you put the bins out tonight?" And your critic comes in and says, "You're such a lazy kind of stupid person for forgetting to put the bins out." That triggers your shame. Then you go into defense mode and start kind of, rationalizing and arguing with your partner, and then yell at them, yell at your partner and say, in a kind of like defensive way. And then the critic comes in and attacks you for your management strategy or your survival strategy. And then you just get caught in a loop. It's a big fat loop that we get stuck in. Yeah.
Really well explained, Noel. Thank you. Just I was nodding my head along as you were giving that
Great. I'm glad
example.
I'm glad that was helpful. Yeah.
Oh, it's such a great visual as well, just because as we're about to move into now some questioning and some things that we can contemplate over the next little while, what we're doing is we're stepping up into that, what was the yellow circle and the adult self and the compassionate witness that was there. Because only when we're in that compassionate witness can we really see what's going on. And those three different sections there, the judge and the child and the coping strategies, we can just watch those play out. And when we do that, like you said, it's hard because sometimes we will watch that from a compassionate place, maybe until we get to the coping strategy, and then the judge will judge that. And so we have to just recognize that and sort of pop back out of it. But once you start to notice it, before we jump into the exercises here, I had this moment years ago now that really changed my relationship with the judge, because I still have a judge in my head and I hear it on almost a daily basis, but it's now something that is much quieter and something that I see as just something I can listen to or not. I have autonomy and choice, whereas a lot of people are ruled by it and have to sort of, undertake
Yeah.
that dictatorship.
And I'm guessing you
Um,
you can kind of catch it and witness it more easily.
Yeah, I laugh at it a lot. That's a great little strategy for me. It
Yeah.
sort of it breaks me out of it. But I had this one day where I was doing exactly what we're about to talk about. I was sitting in that witness position, and I've been watching the judge for probably a couple of weeks. That judge and victim dynamic. And then it was when we had our physical center. I was working long hours, 6 days a week back then. I was finishing up on a Saturday, and I was driving home. I think the football game was on. And all the way home, and I was going through a period where I was having a few months off drinking. I don't mind a beer or a red wine every now and then. And for some reason, I was on this health kick. But on the way home, I didn't realize it was fully the judge at this point, but it was telling me to stop past the bottle shop, get some beers to watch the game. And I was like, no, I was having a discussion with it. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm off alcohol. And it was berating me that I deserved this. It was giving me a PhD dissertation on the time that I walked the old lady across the street when I was 14, all the good things I've done in my life, that why I deserved to go. And then I literally got home in the driveway and I gave in. I'm like, oh, for God's sake. I pulled out around the corner, grabbed a 6 pack of craft beer, and then sat on the couch and turned the footy game on. I'm like, oh, I'm looking forward to this. After the first sip of that beer, that same voice that told me to get it goes, "You're such a piece of shit for drinking." And in that moment, I remember kissing myself laughing and going, "That's it. I'm done with you. I cannot win. I've been trying for many years and I cannot actually please you." So that was a very impactful
Exactly.
moment for me.
Oh, that is such a great example. And it reminds me of how the judge is so full of contradictions. It's like, on the one hand, it kind of it doesn't always come across as a harsh judge. Like in that example, it was more just seducing you into having a drink because you've been such a great guy and you've done a PhD in being a good person. So it's kind of like praising you. And then that's one of the ways the judge shows up, is it's not always attacking us. Sometimes it says, "You're such a winner for living up to some ideal self-image or standard." And it can make you feel fantastic in the moment. But the moment you step outside of the boundaries of the judge's electric force field, you get zapped. And I sometimes think of it as like an electric fence that you can't see. And while you're in it, you can feel fantastic. But the moment you get to the outer edges of that electric fence, you get this big zap, and then you're attacked.
Yeah, and it'll tell you to do the exact opposite to what it told you a minute ago.